أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير. الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا وهو العزيز الغفور. الذي خلق 7 سماوات طباقا ما ترى في خلق الرحمن من تفاوت فارجع البصر هل ترى من فطور ثم ارجع البصر كرتين ينقلب إليك البصر خاسئا وهو حسير. ولقد زينا السماء الدنيا بمصابيها وجعلناها رجوما للشياطين وأعتدنا لهم عذاب السعير. وللذين كفروا بربهم عذاب جهنم وبئس المصير. إذا ألقوا فيها سمعوا لها شهيقا وهي تفور تكاد تميز من الغيظ كلما ألقي فيها فوج سألهم خزنتها ألم يأتكم نذير قالوا بلى قد جاءنا نذير فكذبنا وقلنا ما نزل الله من شيء إن أنتم إلا في ضلال كبير. وقالوا لو كنا نسمع أو نعقل ما كنا في أصحاب السعير فاعترفوا بذنبهم فسحقا لأصحاب السعير. إن الذين يخشون ربهم بالغيب لهم مغفرة وأجر كبير. وأسروا قولكم أو اجهروا به إنه عليم بذات الصدور. ألا يعلم من خلق وهو اللطيف الخبير. هو الذي جعل لكم الأرض ذلولا فامشوا في مناكبها وكلوا من رزقه وإليه النشور. أأمنتم من في السماء أن يخسف بكم الأرض فإذا هي تمور أم أمنتم من في السماء أن يرسل عليكم حاصبا فستعلمون كيف نذير. ولقد كذب الذين من قبلهم فكيف كان نكير. أولم يروا إلى الطير فوقهم صافات ويقبضن ما يمسكهن إلا الرحمن إنه بكل شيء بصير. أمن هذا الذي هو جند لكم ينصركم من دون الرحمن إن الكافرون إلا في غرور. أمن هذا الذي يرزقكم إن أمسك رزقه بل لجوا في عتو ونفور. أفمن يمشي مكبا على وجهه أهدى أمن يمشي سويا على صراط مستقيم. قل هو الذي أنشأكم وجعل لكم السمع والأبصار والأفئدة قليلا ما تشكرون. قل هو الذي ذرأكم في الأرض وإليه تحشرون. ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين. قل إنما العلم عند الله وإنما أنا نذير مبين. فلما رأوه زلفة سيئت وجوه الذين كفروا وقيل هذا الذي كنتم به تدعون. قل أرأيتم إن أهلكني الله ومن معي أو رحمنا فمن يجير الكافرين من عذاب أليم. क़ुल हुवर्रहमानु आमन्ना बिही व अलैहि तवक्कलना फसतअलमून मन हुवा फ़ी ज़लालिम मुबीन। क़ुल अरअयतुम इन अस्बह माउकुम गौरन फमन यअतीकुम बिमाइन मईन। सदक़ल्लाहुल अलियुल अज़ीम।
आज की रात तुझे गोदी में सुला लूं मेरे असग़र राजा। आज की रात तुझे गोदी में सुला लूं मेरे असग़र राजा। लोरी अरमानों से भरपूर सुना लूं मेरे असग़र राजा। आज की रात तुझे गोदी में सुला लूं मेरे असग़र राजा। तीर के आगे मेरे लाल तुझे होना है। देख कर तेरी हंसी जुल्म ने भी रोना है। जो तरीके लड़ाई के सिखा लूं मेरे असग़र राजा। आज की रात तुझे गोदी में सुला लूं मेरे असग़र राजा। पहले अल्लाह का मैं शुक्र बजा लाऊंगी। देख कर खून तेरा लाल मैं मर जाऊंगी। मैं तुझे मौत की हिचकी से बचा लूं मेरे असग़र राजा। आज की रात तुझे गोदी में सुला लूं मेरे असग़र राजा। तू जो रोएगा तो माँ चैन नहीं भी तरप जाएंगी। हो जा खामोश मैं बाबा को बुला लूं। हो जा खामोश मैं बाबा को बुला लूं। मेरे असगर आजा आज की रात तुझे गोदी में सुला लूं। मेरे असगर आजा। ऐसा लगता है अभी रात गुजर जाएगी। फिर मेरे लाल तुझे माये कहाँ पाएगी। तेरे झूले को मैं एक बार झुला लूं। तेरे झूले को मैं एक बार झुला लूं। मेरे असगर आजा आज की रात तुझे गोदी में सुला लूं। मेरे असगर आजा। आज अब्बास भी मकतल में चले जाएंगे। तेरे बाबा भी तुझे साथ में ले जाएंगे। आ तुझे गोद में एक बार उठा लूं। आ तुझे गोद में एक बार उठा लूं। मेरे असगर आजा आज की रात तुझे गोदी में सुला लूं। मेरे असगर आजा। लोरी अरमानों से भरपूर सुना लूं। मेरे असगर आजा आज की रात तुझे गोदी में सुला लूं। मेरे असगर आजा। सलवात सूरत अल-फातिहा।
Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Sayyid Hassan Rizvi, respected elders, brothers, sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for all the names listed on the screen and Kul Arwahil Mu'mineen wal Mu'minat, Sawab al-Fatiha. Ayat-ma Yujibun is requested for all the names listed on the screen and whoever is in need of it here and elsewhere, especially for Motabah who's going to be going for surgery tomorrow. Let us all recite it together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amman yujibul mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su. 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 Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now let us invite Said to come forward and recite tonight's matlis. Par Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad. Salawat.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا والنبينا وحبيب قلوبنا والشفيع نفوسنا والطبيب ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى شفيع والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين المكرمين الخيرين الفاضلين السيدين الصادقين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين روحي وأرواح العالمين لتورى بمقدمه الفداء ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد صلوات على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد مؤمنين مؤمنات brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman salamun alaykum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. For the past few sessions, we've been examining this topic about self-authenticity and being honest and true to oneself. And not the modern-day meaning of fulfilling one's desires and just acting upon whatever base instinct that we might have. But being self-authentic, being true to oneself, is that they are in harmony and in sync with reality as it is. And that a person would alter their beliefs, a person will alter their expression of beliefs, the way that they perform actions, what they say, everything that they do, all of this to make sure it's in line with how things really are in reality, in objective reality. And we talked about this starting with the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ala as being a sadiq, right? One who himself expressed what was real and then helped bring everybody else towards what was true and real, which is the Deen of Islam. We said one of the ways that a true authentic person lives their life is that they constantly keep their aqidah, their aqaid, their belief system in check. They humble themselves enough to know that what they believe right now might be deficient, it might be incorrect, it might be false. So a true, honest individual would keep their mind open and say, well, I need to make sure that I'm strengthening, authenticating, and checking my beliefs constantly. We started off when we were commemorating the Shahadat of Bibi Ma'asuma al-Qum alayha salam with looking at this discussion about women in Islam. There was a few points that we had left off, which we're going to continue on a different session. Since tonight we are commemorating the Shahada of our 11th Imam, Imam Hasan ibn Ali Al-Askari alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. I wanted to take a pause from that discussion about women in Islam, but still stay on our topic about authenticity and specifically authenticating and verifying one's beliefs, their aqaid, their theology, their ideas. And there's a lot of interesting narrations that we get from the 11th Imam. Although, if you remember when we talked about the sort of division of movements within the Imams, right? 12 Imams, divide them up into 3 categories, and you have 4 Imams per category. The first 4 Imams seem to have been focusing on teaching the usul al-din, the fundamentals. The next 4 Imams seem to have been strengthening the furu', the extensions, the fiqh, the ahkam, the deeper meanings of Islam. And then the last 4, they seem to have been preparing the Shia, the Muslims in general, but specifically the Shia, the followers of the Ahlul Bayt, for what it's like when your Imam is not present in front of you. The last 4 Imams, their system seemed to be one where they were training their Shias in how do you deal with issues when your Imam is not in your face, when you can't go up to them directly and ask them. So this is where you see a strengthening of the system of what we call wakala, where the Imams, they appointed representatives either directly or indirectly, and then the Shias would learn to follow them, and that person, that scholar, that alim, would be the link to the Imam. And you see that these final 4 Imam, these last 4, they were the ones which, throughout all the other lives of the Ma'asumin, the Shias had very, very little access. Both in this time and in that time. In that time it's easy to understand because they were jailed, under house arrest, they were being constantly watched, so it was very, very difficult for them to be able to have interactions with their Shia, right? So this system of kind of encrypting beliefs came out, setting up ways to get the Shias together. There's a lot of interesting points to discuss there. But even for us right now, it's difficult because since it was difficult for them back then, right, to get in contact with those Imams, we don't have too much available in our own hadith, in our own ahadith, in our books. We don't have much from those final 4 Imams. The narrations aren't too many, if you compare them to the rest of the Imams at least, right? The middle 4 Imams, you have tons of information about them. A lot of teaching, ahkam, and things about tawheed. There's a lot of information there. But around the time when you start to see the switch from 7th, 8th, 9th, there you start to see the amount of a hadith drop drastically. And then as we move on towards the 10th, 11th, and 12th, then again, we have, I'm exaggerating here, but barely a handful of narrations. The ones that we do have, though, can be very, very powerful. About this point, about authenticating beliefs, checking one's beliefs, making sure and certifying that what we believe is actually true, and there's a solid foundation to it, there's a narration that I was able to find today that I think highlights this point for us well. So what I wanted to do tonight is just to read through the text and then go through a few of these points, comment based on some of the ulama, the way that they have done tafsir and sharh and commented on this narration itself, and see what kind of points we can understand and benefit from, inshaAllah ta'ala. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So this narration, I'm not going to go through the whole chain, because even if I go through it, what's the point? Are you going to know who's in the chain? Probably not, right? I'll mention the last person, the last companion who's actually narrating it, right? And his name is Sahal ibn Ziyad. And there's a lot of interesting debate about him, which I'll leave aside because this is not really the place to talk about issues of ilm al-rijal and things like that. But he's a controversial figure. Regardless, this narration, which is reported in Shaykh Saduq's book, Kitab al-Tawheed, which has been translated in English as well. I think there may be two different translations. And this same narration that we're going to discuss right now is also found in Al-Kafi. At least those two books, if not more books. So Sahl ibn Ziyad, he says that I wrote a letter in the year 255 of Hijri. He wrote a letter to Abu Muhammad Al-Askari alayhi salatu wa salam. Salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So he writes a letter to the Imam. So I'm going to read through the Arabic and try to translate as I go. I'm going to try to go through the whole thing first, and then we're going to come back and go point by point, because there is a lot here. But I want you to get a feel for the whole thing first. And the translation that I'm going to read as well is the one that is the famous one that's out there. I'll read that, and as we'll see that there are some issues with this translation. Now, it's been done by somebody who's reputable, two reputable scholars, but there seems to be, according to other interpretations, some issues there. Just so that we have some idea in our mind before we get into all the nitty-gritty, I'm going to give you the Arabic and the English. Hopefully, you understand what's going on. So, in Sahl ibn Ziyad's letter to the Imam, he says, قَدْ اخْتَلَفَ يَا سَيِّدِي أَصْحَابُنَا فِي التَّوْحِيدِ. He says, Ya Sayyidi, O my Sayyid, O my Master. Our companions, ashabuna, our companions, are in ikhtilaf. They're in disagreement in what issue? Fit tawheed. They're arguing and disagreeing about the concept of tawheed. So what are they disagreeing about? He explains. Minhum man yaqulu hum jism, wa minhum man yaqulu huwa surah. There are some people, there's some groups, some parts of these companions, some of these individuals. We're going to gather from this that they're probably Shia, although it might be tough to believe, but yes, these are Shia. There are some Shia who are claiming, there's some people who say that Allah is, or in the concept of Tawheed, Allah is a jism, He is a body. And there are some other people who say, no, Allah is not a jism, He's a surah, He's an image. So one group is saying that God is a body, not has a body, He is a body. And there are some people who are saying, no, He's an image. And inshallah, when we get back to the commentary, I'll explain a little bit more about how this is possible, how Shias can claim something like this. So he mentions this. Then, فَإِنْ رَأَيْتَ يَا سَيِّدِي أَن تُعَلِّمَنِي مِنْ ذَلِكَ مَا أَقِفُ عَلَيْهِ وَلَا أَجُوزُ فَعَلْتَ مُتَطَوِّلًا عَلَى عَبْدِكَ. So, O my Master, our scholars are divided on the question of Tawheed. Some of them say that God has a body, some of them say He has an image, or some of them say He is a body, some of them say He is an image. Ya Sayyidi, O my Master, my Sayyid, if you deem it appropriate, if you think it's wise, if you think it's right, then teach me the correct view, since I don't know the answer, and be gracious to your abd, be gracious to your servant. So I mixed in a little bit of the original translation. I said I didn't want to do that, but then I kind of got lost in there. But let me read this part again. O my Master, O my Sayyid, our scholars are divided on the question of Tawheed, of divine unity. Some of them say that He has a body, others say that He has an image. Ya Sayyidi, if you think it's appropriate, if you deem it appropriate, teach me the correct view, since I don't know the answer, and be gracious to your servant. Now, the Imam's answer. فَوَقَّعَ بِخَطِّهِ عَلَيْهِ. In this narration it says, then the Imam, in his own handwriting, so nobody else did this, this is the Imam writing himself back to Sahl ibn Ziyad. He says, he wrote to me, and this is what he says. سَأَلْتَ عَنِ التَّوْحِيدِ. You asked about Tawheed. وَهَذَا عَنْكُمْ مَعْزُولٌ. And this is far from your reach. In this translation it says, this is far from your honorable reach, although the word honorable is not there, but okay. Allahun wahid, ahad. Allah, the exalted, is one, alone, needless. And then he quotes the Quran. Lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad. Right? He's quoting, now the Imam's quoting from Surah Ikhlas, right? That lam yalid, he doesn't give birth, right? Wa lam yulad, he was not born of anybody. Wa lam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad. And there's no one else that's like him. Khaliqun. He is, right, there's none equal to him in creation as well. So he kind of adds upon the verse of Quran. وَلَيْسَ بِمَخْلُوقٍ يَخْلُقُ تَبَارَكَ وَتَعَالَى مَا يَشَاءُ مِنَ الْأَجْسَامِ وَغَيْرِ ذَلك. He, the subhanahu wa ta'ala, tabaraka wa ta'ala, so he's the creator, he's not created, and he creates bodies as he wishes. وَلَيْسَ بِسُورَةٍ جَلَّ ثَنَاؤُهُ وَتَقَدَّسَتْ أَسْمَاؤُهُ أَنْ يَكُونَ لَهُ شِبْهٌ هُوَ لَا غَيْرُ لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. He creates, so he says, he creates things, he creates bodies as he wishes, he creates images as he wishes, but he is not an image. Exalted be his praise, hallowed be his names. He is far above having a tashbih, a resemblance. There's nothing like him. And then he quotes the verse of Quran, right? Laysa kamithlihi shay. There's nothing like him. Nothing is like Allah. And huwa as-sami'ul basir. He is the all-hearing and the all-seeing. Okay. So hopefully in that whole messed up sort of translation back and forth, you have a general idea of what's going on here. Sahl ibn Ziyad is saying that, look, our companions, they're arguing about Allah, about Tawheed. Some are saying that God, according to the translation, has a body. Some say he has an image. So, can you teach me what the right answer is? And the Imam says, like, this is beyond you. Like, this is beyond your understanding. Then he says, and then he quotes the Quran in Surah Ikhlas, and he starts showing that, Allah is not a body, he's not an image, he creates bodies, he creates images, he does whatever he wants. And then, he quotes that there's nothing that's like God. Now, at first glance, if you were just to read this translation in the book, this would seem, I think pretty straightforward. In the sense that, okay, this guy's asking if God has a body, if God is an image. I mean, isn't this like Sunday school material? This is like Madrasa Day 1. God has no body, he has no image. What kind of question is this? Doesn't this seem a little ridiculous? This is a Shia, not of the first Imam, not of somebody at the time of the Prophet who's asking about, we don't know anything about this God, this Allah, tell us about it. This is somebody living at the time of the 11th Imam. How in the world could a Shia of the 11th Imam ask about whether God has a body or an image? More, why is it that companions, other Shias are arguing about this? How in the world are Shias disagreeing about whether God has a body or an image? Doesn't this seem a little ridiculous? Something that our kids know. At 2, 3 years old, they know that, you can't see God. He doesn't have a body. He's not an image. Why in the world are these companions asking about a question like this? So this is the first thing that I want you for a few seconds just to think about as you recite As-salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The first takeaway that we can get from this point, from this hadith, is this, perhaps. We said that a person, if they're truly being honest and authentic, they won't shy away from questioning their beliefs. They'll be humble. This companion, rather than getting involved in the debate between these two, he writes directly to the Imam. He says, you know what, they're arguing, you need to give me the answer. He goes straight to the source. For something as simple as Tawheed, whereas you and I, right, I'm sure from the discussions we've had before, you're like, okay, Hassan, I get it. There are some things in Islam that, we can't understand with our minds, that we can't debate about, that we have to go and do more research, right? We have to check our belief system. Okay, I get it. But Tawheed, God is one, he doesn't have a body. I don't need to ask anybody about that. Right? That's basic stuff. But perhaps over here, what Sahl ibn Ziyad, through this hadith, is showing us that even the most simplest of questions is something that he's checking with the Imam. He doesn't take any belief for granted. Every single thing, he's like, well, I don't know. They're arguing about it. I don't want to get involved. Let me ask you. Let me go straight to the source. So this is why when we say it's weird that a Shia of the 11th Imam is asking about Tawheed, that's because our understanding of the Shias is messed up. This is a true Shia who's saying that, look, I am your abd, I'm your slave. Everything that you tell me, Imam, I'm going to follow. So I'm going to ask you about this. I'm not going to get involved in this. I'm not going to sit there and philosophize. I'm going to ask you. You're God's representative. You're his proof. You're his hujjah. Tell me what the answer is. So that's what a person who's being truthful and authentic, they would do. Even the simplest question that they might have taken for granted, they would go ahead and ask. What we see on the other side is that a person who's closed their mind off to asking even these kind of questions, that is a sign of ignorance, arrogance, or maybe even both. What we call what? Jahlul murakkab. Is that you have this compound ignorance, that you don't know things, but you think that you do know, right? Compound ignorance is the worst thing that a person could have. It's the worst spiritual disease. I think we've talked about this, right, many months ago. When you think you know what's going on, you think you know about Allah, you think know about Tawheed, about Islam, about Shiism, about fiqh rule, whatever it is, right? Nowadays, right, with this idea of voting or not voting going on, lesser of two evils, all of these things, right? Everybody seems to have an opinion, and they seem to know what's going on. It's very, very rare where somebody actually digs deeper and asks questions, whether it's from the political aspect or the religious aspect of it. So that's one thing that we can learn from this narration in the beginning. The second is this. Now, you probably wouldn't have been able to pick it up from the Arabic, but there is a lot of etiquette, adab and respect, a lot of ihtiram in the way that Sahal is asking this question to the Imam. So let me go back. So some of the stuff is simple, right? He says, okay, Ya Sayyidi, people disagree. So okay, he's, bigging up the Imam, Ya Sayyidi, oh my master. Okay, we can understand that. That's really nice. He says it later again, right? Ya Sayyidi. Okay, that seems simple enough. But there's something more. The way that the translation seems, kind of on face value, he's saying, okay, they're disagreeing about this question about Tawheed, whether God is an image or a body, or has an image or a body. Then he says, the translation here that this scholar has is, if you deem it appropriate, teach me the correct view, since I don't know the answer, and be gracious to your servant. Okay, so teach me. So that itself, one person could say that's a layer of humility. I'm your servant, teach me. Okay. So I would, respectfully disagree with the scholar in the way that they've translated it like this. If you look at the Arabic and are very precise, that's not what this companion is saying. That's not how he's phrasing the question. He's not saying, teach me, and he's not saying, be gracious to me. He's not saying that. It's not, precise. Over here, he says, فَإِن رَأَيْتَ يَا سَيِّدِي. If you see, if you think, if you decide, أَن تُعَلِّمَنِي مِن ذَلِكَ. If you decide to teach me about that, meaning about this issue. If you decide to teach me about that, مَا أَقِفُ عَلَيْهِ. So if you decide, if you see that it's appropriate, if you see that you want to teach me about it, and that the answer will satisfy me, it'll be a satisfactory answer for me, right? That's what this ma aqifu alayh, that I'll stop. Once you give me the answer, then I'll stop. Wala ajuzuhu, and I won't go beyond it. Meaning, the minute you give me the answer, I'm not going to add to anything. I'm not going to say anything else. So if you think it's appropriate for you to teach me, and in this, being appropriate, you'll teach me in a way that I won't have anything to say. I won't add anything. I won't question you anymore. I won't have any more doubts about the issue. If you think it's appropriate to give me the full answer, in a sense is what he's saying. And if you think that I am able to learn from you in the first place, then, again, what does he say after this? فَعَلْتَ مُتَطَوِّلًا عَلَىٰ عَبْدِكَ. He doesn't say, okay, so then teach me, so then do it. He says, again, it's very hard to kind of give a literal translation here, but he says, if you decide, Ya Sayyidi, to teach me about that, this issue of Tawheed, and I'm able to be satisfied with the answer, I won't move beyond that, I won't exceed your answer, then you have done a big favor to your abd. So if you decide to teach me, then you would have done a big favor to your abd. This is much different than the way that this other translator had put it. He said, teach me the right view and be gracious to me. In this, the actual Arabic, there is no command to the Imam at all. He's not telling him to do anything. He's actually using past tense verbs. He's saying, if you had decided, if you thought it's appropriate, if you want to do this, if you see that it's right, if this is correct in your eyes, you would have done something that's graceful. You would have done a favor to me. Never does he say, teach me. He doesn't give the Imam an order. Never does he say, you should, be the one to do a favor to me. He never even uses the command verb on him. So some of the ulama say, look, this, in a sense, is a lesson for us on how we should be speaking to those in authority. Allah, the prophets, the imams, awliya, ulama, things like this. Is, these sort of requests, sometimes these demands that are made, this is not in the language of a Shia. When a person speaks to a higher level of authority, then they use language which is becoming of them. And I think one of the other ulama, I didn't grab the actual Quranic verse, but they gave an example. They said, when, I think it was Nabi Ayyub alayhi salam, when he was dealing with his difficulties, and again, I forget the exact phrase that he uses in the Quran, but He could have said, Allah, you have, put all these trials on me, so take them away, right? Instead, the way that it's phrased in the Quran, again, I'm paraphrasing it because I don't remember the Arabic exactly, is that Allah, you are the one, so this bala has come onto me, and then he ends by saying, and you do, you take away harmful things. You are the one that is graceful. He doesn't even demand things out of God. The Prophet's saying that, look, there's bala, there's all these trials and tribulations that I'm struggling with, and you're somebody that takes away bala. You're somebody that gives people things. You're somebody that does favors. That's it. He stops it there. He just mentions God's quality and he ends. Because what's understood from that is if you recognize Allah, then Allah will take away the bala. But he doesn't say, Allah, take away my bala. So this is one of the examples that some of the ulama give. That over here, that's what Sahl ibn Ziyad is doing as well. He's saying, look, if you think that I can handle your answer, if you think it's good for me to learn from you, then you'd be doing a big favor. That's it. I'm not going to command you to teach me, and I'm not going to tell you that you should be doing me a favor. I'm going to recognize your station, your maqam as a ma'soom, as an imam, and then I'll just sit back and let you do what you think is right and appropriate. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. What's also interesting here is when he mentions that, there's two opinions, right? Some people say that God has a body, or God is a body, and some people are saying God is an image. Sometimes when we have, or we hear different opinions or different ideas, what we end up doing is we say, well, so-and-so person in the community said this, and so-and-so person in the community said this. Right? We go and we either tell our friends or, we go tell a sheikh or Mulana or whatever, right? Say, oh, they said this and they said this. Well, what do you have to say? And sometimes we do it unintentionally, right? We're just mentioning that, oh, these are the people who are saying it. Sometimes what comes in our mind when we mention names specifically is because we want the other person, the one we're telling to, whether it's friend, family member, scholar, whatever, we want them to know that, one of these answers obviously is a dumb answer. It's a dumb thing they said, and we want you to associate this person with their stupidity. Right? You're trying to call the person out in your own kind of smart way. And we do that, unfortunately, time to time. Over here, Sahl ibn Ziyad doesn't even mention their names. So look, there are some people who believe this and some people who say this. That's it. He could have easily said, so-and-so scholar from Basra said this. So-and-so scholar said this from this area. He could have mentioned them by name, but he didn't. Even there where perhaps he's waiting for the imam to give the answer, perhaps in his mind he's thinking, when the imam gives an answer, it could make these people look bad. I don't want them to look bad in the imam's eyes. And we have the same concept in other narrations as well, but from the other point, where the narration from Imam Sajjad, Imam Zayn al-Abidin, alayhi salatu wassalam, salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Somebody, a companion, a quote-unquote Shia, had come to him once and complained about some issue. He said, so-and-so person that, in front of you says all these things and loves you and is your Shia, whatever, so-and-so person, they said this about you. They said this about you and you about your family. And then he's expecting the imam to say, oh, great job, pat him on the head, good boy, acha bacha, you told me all this, that's so wonderful what you did. And the imam shuts him down. He says, why did you tell me this? Why did you bring this dirty laundry in front of me? Before, I had no idea, and this person was, beloved, he was honorable in my eyes. Allah had concealed this from me. Now you have thought it better to come and, air this dirty laundry. You have ruined this person's reputation. This is on you now. I wish you hadn't told me about this individual. I wish you had either hidden his name or not even mentioned this at all. There's no benefit to me knowing this information. So another thing that we can learn from this as well is if we are really sincere about learning something, and we know that there's different ideas, different opinions, some fitnas going on, is there really any benefit to mentioning names? In most cases, probably not. In most cases, mentioning names is probably not going to help out. So when we are doing this, if we're sincere about learning, sincere about educating ourselves, then keep the names aside. If the questioner says, or the person you're asking says, I need to know names so that for whatever reason, okay, maybe at that point. But on our own, to give the names seems like it could be something which is, it's not akhlaqi, it's not moral, it's not an ethical trait for a Shia of the Ahlul Bayt. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. There's one more point that because we're running out of time. There's one more point that I'll focus on, and then we'll move on to the masa'ib. And of course, again, this narration, there's a lot that's, a lot of the ulama have written commentaries on this. So there's only one last point that I want to go to. So he asks the question, and now the imam responds. And maybe you caught it when I was reading the translation. The imam responds to him and says, "Sa'alta an at-tawheed." You've asked about tawheed. وَهَذَا عَنْكُمْ مَعْزُولٌ. And this is, again, the way the person translated it, this is far from your honorable reach. He's saying that this issue is ma'zul. Ma'zul comes from ayn, zal, lam, azal. Azala means to push something or move something away. So literally this is that this issue about tawheed is something that's far away from you. It's pushed away from you. So some people, when they read this hadith, they think that, oh, Imam is making fun of the guy. It's like, man, you're an idiot. This is beyond you. Why would you as a Shia ask me about tawheed, about whether God has a body or an image? And some have commented like that. When they write their commentaries, that's how they say it. That Sahil ibn Ziyad, this is beyond you. I expected better from you. Why are you asking me like this? That's what some say. But others say, no, you've misunderstood what the Imam is actually saying here. See, ma'zal, or ma'zul, or this and that, is about when something is beyond your reach. So sometimes ma'zal is even used when you're talking about somebody who's been exiled, when they're like in an isolation ward, you would call that ma'zal, a place of being distanced, or even quarantine, right? When somebody is put away for their own benefit and for others' benefit, they could be described as being ma'zul. So what the other commentator says that, look, the Imam is actually praising him and saying, what you have done here, when you asking me directly, is showing that, look, this issue about talking about tawheed, this is beyond your understanding. This is not something that you can reach on your own. You can't just sit there, right, using, math and science and philosophy. You can't figure this out. You've done the right thing by asking the Ahlul Bayt. You've done the right thing by asking me. This issue wasn't within your purview. It's not in your jurisdiction. You can't figure this stuff out by yourself. You've done the right thing by being a Shia of the Ahlul Bayt, by asking the Ahlul Bayt, by asking me. And this, again, this is, with the rest of the narration, this makes sense. Because if the Imam was saying, oh, why are you doing this? This is so dumb. It doesn't make sense. Then look, the Imam is answering him, and he's giving him a very deep answer about Allah's nature, about bodies and images, which we don't have time to go into. But it seems as though Imam is saying, yes, you're right. This is beyond your understanding. So when you're telling me that if, when the Imam's, when Sahil is saying to the Imam, if you think it's appropriate, and if you think I can handle the answer, if you think that I'll be able to be satisfied with the way that you respond to me, if you think that I won't go beyond your answer, if you think that I will understand what's going on, then you'll be doing a big favor to me. See how that's how Sahil asks, and the Imam is saying, yes, you're right. This is beyond you, but I still will teach it to you. Because it's beyond you, because you can't get to this on your own, you need a mu'allim, you need a teacher, you need an ustad, you need somebody. And nowadays, what we see sometimes in communities is that whether it's general individuals in the community, members, well-intentioned members, whether it's some of the kind of speakers, the zakireen, celebrities, whatever you want to call them, they have this, we have this concept of being self-studied, where a person thinks that they can go and just think about the issue themselves and then come up with an answer. Like, I thought about it and this is my answer. Without really having a background in the higher level Islamic sciences, without knowing what the ulama have said on the subject. And a lot of them, who again comment about contemporary issues, they don't even know Arabic, or they don't know Farsi. They don't know any of the, even Urdu for that matter. They don't know any language that they could go and actually read a higher level text. We don't really have that stuff in English. So sometimes it's surprising when we, have these speakers come, or zakireen, zakirat, whatever, and they try to give their opinions and explain things, but it's outside they're not going to understand it. Even this narration here, if you go and look at the English translation, which again, I know I messed it up, but I gave you at least a part of it, you see that this would have taken your mind somewhere else completely. Even myself, when I was trying to figure out what this, I couldn't understand the Arabic. It was very difficult for me. So I had to consult other multiple commentaries to figure out what was going on. Even there, about this narration, about every single word, there was multiple interpretations. This is not an easy thing. We're trying to get to the truth. We're trying to get to the reality of what's going on in the world. It's not going to be something that, yeah, you can just go on alislam.org and figure it out in 10 minutes. It's not going to be like that. But what we have right now, as we've been talking about before, the modern world is set up that people think that they can go research anything and then they become a master all of a sudden. Yeah, I can Google it. I can figure it out. Right? That's why nowadays everybody thinks they understand whether masks work or not, whether COVID is a conspiracy or not, right? Or whether a vaccine, when it does come, will it work or not? It's a conspiracy, people putting chips in us. Like, people will discuss this stuff on their own because they saw 1 or 2 YouTube videos. So these ideas will happen. And what's interesting is, again, another point from the narration, is Sahl ibn Ziyad didn't involve himself in the argument between these two groups. He said, look, what happens to us is when we get involved in these discussions in our barazas, this is people arguing back and forth nonsensically. Or in WhatsApp groups. Oh, let's discuss, let's have an open debate. That's, then we'll get to the answer. What qualifications do people have in some WhatsApp group or in a baraza to be able to answer these questions? What do you think? What's your opinion? What value does your opinion have? Can we sit in a session and say, let's figure out what is the nature of black holes? This is my opinion. I think black holes are, there's an alien in another dimension, the alien farted, and that's how a black hole came. That's my theory. Like, you'd laugh, like, oh, it doesn't make sense. Well, I have an opinion. I'm entitled. Freedom of speech. I can do whatever I want. Yeah, you can have a dumb opinion if you want. That's fine. You can have an uneducated opinion, but don't think that it's on the same level as somebody who spent, their whole life studying the subject. Right? Stephen Hawking, if he gives a theory about the black hole, that's going to be a lot different than me saying that, yeah, it's an alien's fart, right? They're not going to have the same value. It's not, well, okay, lakum dinukum waliya din. You have your opinion, I've got mine. No, that's not how it works. In Islam, we believe in a hierarchy of knowledge. That there aren't ulama, and not even all the ulama are at the same level. Somebody who comes, right, and just gives a general speech, okay, that's good that they're doing that, but there's a limit to their knowledge. A marja', they have a different level, right? In ayatullah, that's a different level. And even among the maraji', we know that there's different levels as well. Some will excel in multiple fields, in fiqh and usul, and in history, and in philosophy, and in irfan, and everything. And some, maybe it's only fiqh and usul, and that's okay. Once we learn to humble ourselves and understand how knowledge works, how the discipline of understanding reality works, that should in turn cause us to humble ourselves as well. That sometimes we don't want to get involved in these discussions and say, what, why don't we ask somebody qualified before we give off our own ridiculous sort of ideas and opinions. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We said that the last 4 imams, we don't have much information about them. Even, unfortunately, when it comes to the musibah and the gham of the imams, this is another tragedy for us that we have to deal with. Even the details, or the details that sometimes we would like to hear, that we have about the Shahadah of Imam Ali alayhi salam, about Imam Hassan, about Imam Hussein, Imam Zain al-Abidin, we have information. We can we can imagine what happened to them because of the details that are mentioned. Unfortunately, because of the zalimeen of that time, because of the issues that happened there, the information about the gham, the musibah, the bala, what took place to many of these imams towards the end has been restricted and limited. But there are some points where we can pay our respects to the Prophet, to Bibi Fatima, and to the imam of the time. They say that there were, among the ma'asumeen, alayhimus salam, there were 4 of the imams who had received poison. And now when we hear this idea that this imam was given poison, this imam was given poison, it's not the same. There were differences in the types of poison, in the effects, in the intensity. We know, for example, that yes, when Imam Ali alayhi salam was hit with a sword, that was dipped in poison. And that poison, yes, it was strong, but it wasn't as strong as it wasn't known to be the imam that died from that poison necessarily. The 4 imams that normally are mentioned when it comes to poison is first Imam Hasan, then Imam al-Kadhim, then Imam al-Rida, and finally Imam al-Askari. Each of them had was given a different type of poison with a different intensity, a different amount. With Imam Hasan, they say that the poison was so strong, it was so bad, it took such a toll on his body that he would not just initially he coughed off blood, but according to the narrations, he had this ball on the side and then he began to cough up little pieces of his liver. This is how strong the poison was. once Imam Hussein, his brother comes to him to try to take care of his brother, and he says, Ya akhi, I see this, I feel this pain that you, and I see pieces of your liver over here. And he wants to do something for the Imam, and he can't do anything for his Imam. So Imam Hassan says, take this bowl and hide it somewhere. So Imam Hassan tells Imam Hussein, hide this bowl somewhere. Imam Hussein asks him, why do you want me to hide this bowl? He says, because in a few moments, our sister Zainab will come, and I don't want her to see this. I don't want her heart to break when she sees something like this. When Imam Kadhim alayhi salam, when he received the poison, they say, because of the weakness of his body, because they weren't giving him food while he was sitting in prison, the poison took such a toll that it was tough for him to even eat food. So when some of the secret Shias would come to him after he was given the poison, they would try to feed him a date. They say, please, we brought you one date, quickly eat this. He said, I can't even eat this date because of the poison, the shidda, the intensity of the poison in my body. Even eating this one date that you're giving me is causing me pain, so I can't take this from you. We know from the pain, the poison that was given to the 8th Imam, because there was no Shias around him at that time, the pain was so intense, the poison was so intense that they say he collapsed right there. And because there was nobody with him, no companion, no family member, he collapsed on the floor in front of Ma'mun. But perhaps one of the worst of all is the poison that was given to our 11th Imam. They say once one of his companions comes and he sees him. He sees the Imam praying sitting down. And he says, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, Ya Sayyidi, Ya Mawlai, you're 27 years old. What are you doing praying sitting down? How could you be in a state like this? We know all of your forefathers to be greater than this. You're 27 years old. You're in your prime. You're in your youth. Why are you like this? He says, don't look at my age. Don't look at my youth. Look at the amount of poison they had given me. The poison is so shadid that I can't even stand up for my wajib namaz. Perhaps then maybe he even remembered Bibi Zainab. Bibi Zainab on Sham Ghariba. In the same way, they said that they had seen her praying her Salatul Layl. And when Imam Sajjad and others came and saw her saying, praying Salatul Layl, they saw her sitting down as well. And they said, Ya Bibi, why are you praying down with your Salatul Layl? We know who you are. When you read Namaz al-Shab, you should be up. He says, yes, normally I would do it like this, but the thirst has killed me so much that I don't have the strength to stand for my Salatul Layl. ألا لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره صلوات على محمد وعلى محمد.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. कहते थे शाहे ज़मन बाबा हसन अस्करी, कहते थे शाहे ज़मन बाबा हसन अस्करी, हाय ये क्या हो गया बाबा हसन अस्करी. कहते थे शाहे ज़मन बाबा हसन अस्करी, कहते थे शाहे ज़मन बाबा हसन अस्करी, हाय ये क्या हो गया बाबा हसन अस्करी. सूए जिना चल बसे कौन हमारा है अब, सूए जिना चल बसे कौन है हमारा है अब, दिल हुआ टुकड़े मेरा बाबा हसन अस्करी. कहते थे शाहे ज़मन बाबा हसन अस्करी, कहते थे शाहे ज़मन बाबा हसन अस्करी, हाय ये क्या हो गया बाब. गौहर नायब थे आप ए बाबा मेरे, गौहर नायब थे आप ए मेरे बाबा में, रोना में क्यों भला बाबा हसन अस्करी. कहते थे शाहे ज़मन बाबा हसन अस्करी, कहते थे शाहे ज़मन हसन अस्करी, हाय ये क्या हो गया बाबा हसन अस्करी या हुसैन या हुसैन। शब्बीर की वो लाडली सीने पे जोशे के पली, जिसकी अबा बन में जली, जिसकी अबा बन में जली, मुँह पे तमाचों के निशा मौला हक इमाम या हसन या हुसैन। मौला हक या हुसैन या हुसैन या हुसैन। वो आबिदे बीमार था, चलने से जो लाचार था, और शाम का बाजार था, और शाम का बाजार था, और मुस्तफ़ा की बेटियां मौला हक इमाम, मौला हक इमाम, इमाम या हसन या हुसैन या हुसैन। प्यासे गले खंजर चले, चादर छिनी खैमे जले, अब्बास के परचम तले, अब्बास के परचम तले, रो कर कहे ये बीबियाँ मौला हक इमाम या हसन या हुसैन। मौला हक इमाम या हसन या हुसैन या हुसैन। रोकर कहा कासिम की माँ, मारा गया कासिम जवां। ए लाल में ढूंढूं कहाँ, ए लाल में ढूंढूं कहाँ, बेवा कथा जो आसरा मौला हक इमाम या हसन या हुसैन। मौला हक इमाम या हसन या हुसैन या हुसैन या हुसैन। सूरत मुबारक अल-फातिहा।
Ziyarat. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Assalamu alayka ya Rasulullah. Assalamu alayka ya Amir al-Mu'minin. Assalamu alayka ya Fatima al-Zahra Sayyidatan Nisa al-Alamin. Assalamu alayka ya Khadijah al-Kubra. Assalamu alayka ya Hasan al-Mujtaba. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah al-Hussein wa ala tis'at al-masumin min dhurriyatik. علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة بن الحسن. أجل الله فرجك وسخ الله مخرجك وظهورك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.